Joe Biden pardoned members of the J6 committee. He pardoned basically his entire family.
There's legal
exactly.
question whether those pardons are valid.
Isn't it amazing that Fauci scored a pardon from Joe Biden at the 0 hour all the way back to 2014? Wow. You know what's crazy about that date, guys, is 2014 is right about the same time that Anthony Fauci got involved with gain-of-function research and a certain Chinese lab. Yeah.
Yep.
Hilarity in Ukraine probably dates back to somewhere thereabouts as well.
There's legal
exactly.
question whether those pardons are valid. It's a little bit of a complicated thing. If you want, I can explain to you.
Well, no, I want to talk about that. As it came up, Joe, that is something that a lot of people have asked questions about. Joe Biden pardoned members of the J6 committee. He pardoned basically his entire family. There were congressional inquiries, discoveries on the public record of finding, 24 different bank accounts and business entities that the Biden family had formed in a complicated web to allegedly, ostensibly conceal a mass web of money that pumped in from foreign countries, many of them not friendly to the United States. A lot of these people haven't been charged with anything yet. There's no crime there. There's no there. So a lot of folks have asked, well, can a president just throw out a pardon for something that hasn't yet happened? It seems a bit bizarre. So, Joe, help us out here.
The pardon power is considered to be incredibly broad, where he alone has, and you can ask the question whether it's he or the office of the presidency. For now, let's call it the office of the presidency, has the unique power under the Constitution to pardon whoever he wants for any federal crimes, save for anything for impeachment. That's essentially that's what for any. It actually says for any offense, which some people say is broader than crimes, even if it's not yet a crime. A lot of people will zero in on the word offense and say, even if it's not yet a charged crime, that's an offense that he could theoretically pardon. And that perhaps is true. Perhaps it is broader than crime. The question really comes in as far as we need to start by understanding how the law operates, and that when I or anyone tells you what the law is in an area that is not yet adjudicated by a court, it is all speculative. It is all not actually the law. It's all people talking about philosophy as to what the law should be based on looking at a particular statute. Here's a great example which has been a big story in the news ever since J6 and through the case of U.S. v. Fisher, and now with the pardoning of the J6 defendants. Many of the J6 defendants were charged with 18 U.S.C. 1519 C2, which is obstruction, that they were obstructing the proceedings. Merrick Garland argued that when they went in there and they were trying to stop the electoral count from happening, they were obstructing the proceedings. The interesting thing about that charge is that if you look at the history behind 18 U.S.C. 1519, that was all codified after Enron. So what happened by Enron, for those of you too young to remember, is when they realized they were in trouble and potentially facing criminal problems, they basically ran their shredding machines day and night for ages, shredding thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, or potentially millions of documents, and just shredding. So this is before, a lot of this stuff was hard copies. So just shredding and shredding.
Destruction of evidence, right?
Yes, it was destruction of evidence. When Congress saw this, they said, we don't want people to be able to shred stuff so they can hide their crimes. So we're going to make a new separate crime for the act of shredding. So when you're anticipating that you're going to be brought before some sort of court proceeding. And that's where you have 18 U.S.C. 1519, and that's what obstruction always meant. Now, I'm not going to break down and go into the minutia about that particular statute, but the point that I'm making here is on the morning of January 6th, 2021, if anyone would have asked, what's the law with obstruction? What is that applying to? Everyone would assume this is applying to destroying evidence for a trial. That's what it's talking about. You're obstructing because you're trying to stop yourself from being criminally convicted of something. So maybe it's a little broader in circumstances, like if you burn a dress or some clothing that has DNA on it, that also would fall in. But it's basically you're destroying evidence to protect yourself from facing liability for a crime. That's how everyone looked at that statute. After January 6th, 2021, and really when Biden came into office and Merrick Garland took over, he said, the language of that statute is a little broad. And since it says it's obstructing a proceeding, and they were obstructing a proceeding, I want to apply it to these folks who are not destroying evidence, but they're interfering with the electoral count. That's obstructing, and there seems to be language in the statute which gives it a little bit of added breadth. So they said, okay, let's reinterpret that statute and now say it's going to be obstruction. And they started charging thousands of people with 18 U.S.C. 1519 C2. Anyone who went into the building, basically, and it's a 10-year crime just for the act of obstructing. So it was a real hammer over someone's head to be facing that potential crime. And when they started charging these defendants with that, now the question is the court going to recognize it? And the court did. The D.C. court did. All the D.C.'s lower courts did. The D.C. Circuit Court did. And so many of these defendants went to prison for that crime or pleaded down because of that crime. And it was a real hammer. And before January 6th, no one looked at that as that this action is a violation of that crime. So now my point is that Merrick Garland now is sort of changing what the law is. There's this ambiguous law, and now because of him, he's changing the law. And once the court recognizes that change, now that's the law. As of that time period from 2022, 2023, that is the law, that if you're obstructing some official proceeding going on, you could be charged with 18 U.S.C. 1519. So that during that period of history, that's the law. Along comes the Supreme Court in the case of United States v. Fisher, and they say, no. That's not what that statute's meant to be, and it's only supposed to be for destroying evidence. And anyone who was hit with that charge and found guilty of it, that in the United States and Fisher cannot, in particular, defendant, one of the J6 defendants, cannot be charged with this because that statute is not dealing with this type of scenario here. Which means now that's the law. So when you're trying to understand a statute or how a constitution works or how anything works, you need to understand that until a court actually says this is the law or this is not the law, we're all just guessing. We're all just speculating what does the law actually mean, and we're all coming up with our best theories as to how a court should rule or will rule, but we don't really know. This is really critical to understand when we're applying it to try and understand how pardons work, because this is an area which has very, very scant amount of cases that actually have tried to assess what is the law. So, for example, when people are pointing and saying, hey, it's totally fine to pardon someone for something that they weren't charged with. It's completely fine. We have a lot of examples of that. The draft dodgers were all pardoned without being charged. From the Vietnam War, we saw it with the Civil War. All the people who engaged in insurrection, their charges were dropped. We saw Ford pardon Nixon. He had never been charged yet, and he pardoned him. So we see that the concept of giving someone a pardon is out there, that historically it has worked. However, it was never really tested. No one actually said, you know what? I know he said there's a pardon, but I don't think he has the power to give that pardon. And the power for his pardon is certainly not unlimited. Let me ask the three of you gentlemen, okay? Let's assume Trump says, I am now pardoning anybody who goes out there and kills X anytime the next month. I'm giving you a pardon in advance, in advance of the future. Go out and kill Mr. Jones. I'm giving you a pardon. Do you think that's a valid pardon or not? If he changes his mind after that, do you think that's a valid pardon or not?
In the context of what you just said, that sounds like the purge, right?
It sounds insane. It sounds insane.
Hey, if you can go out and do whatever you want in the next month, I will give you a pardon. I mean, this is what the premise of the Hollywood movie The Purge was based on, right?
Right. Yeah.
And to be fair, at the time when you mentioned, the pardon to Nixon, well, Nixon was he was being processed through an impeachment. I mean, they were looking at impeachment. Like there was something definitive that was going on. There was a proceeding that was being looked at to hit Nixon with. So it's like, okay, pardon, right?
Right.
Nobody has actually, to this point, nobody has charged or has indicated that there would be charges forthcoming for Anthony Fauci or for certain
Liz
members
Cheney,
of the Biden. Liz Cheney, the members of the Biden
James
family.
Biden. Yeah,
none
of them.
None of that. Joe's brother, right? So it's like, this is just, we're going to throw this out there because F it, right? I mean, this to me is just saying, they're so guilty. I don't know, Matt, Mark, what do y'all think?
I mean, do you think that I'll ask you a couple of questions. Do you think a future pardon works, or do you think that that's saying I'm pardoning for something that happens in the future that probably shouldn't work under the law, and probably no court would uphold that if it was granted? What are your thoughts on it? Because I think most people come in where Valiant just came in. I think most people come in and say you can't do that. So that right. And now the next question I'll give you the next question.
Especially when there was let's be honest, especially at this point when we have so much overwhelming evidence against some of the characters that Joe Biden pardoned. Like there were like massive amounts of congressional testimony with actual evidence presented. Something is seriously wrong here.
That part really should not be part of the equation, because he could see a mass murderer who gets convicted of mass murder, who's a terrible human being, commits a genocide. You could say, I'm pardoning this guy, and he has that power, no matter how evil and how much evidence we have of it. He has that power. But the point that I'm making is he has to know what he's pardoning in order for it to be a valid pardon. That's something. Okay. How can a king or any lord have the power to forgive someone for a sin when they don't know what sin they've committed? They have no idea at all what sin they committed. But whatever you did, I'm conferring on you like I'm God conferring on the blessing that
you said the magic word, though, Joe. You said king. That's the problem. And I think there's been certain previous administrations who have thought themselves kings.
Right.
In this regard.
But even if we give him the power of a king, even if we pretend that he has the power of a king, even when we give him that lofty status, shouldn't the king know what he's pardoning? Not just be like anything that happened in the last 10 years? What if Anthony Fauci went out there and murdered someone to get money and stole money from them and used that for funding his research? Well, that's pardon now. I mean, that it doesn't make any sense to actually logically, the same way you wouldn't say a pardon on the future makes sense. It doesn't really make sense to say that without knowing what the crime is, that a president has the power to pardon it. Now, he has granted them, and the only way we'll know whether or not that power is effective, whether it works, is if someone, prosecutor, or Pam Bondi, for example, comes out there and starts bringing charges against some of these people, and then they say, no, I have a pardon, and then Pam Bondi says, I don't think that's a valid pardon because it's too broad and he doesn't specify what crimes, and then a judge would say, yes, it's a valid pardon, or no, that's an invalid pardon, you can go ahead and prosecute them. That's the only time we're really going to know for sure, is if some prosecutor tests the validity of these ridiculously broad pardons, and that can apply to anything Hunter Biden was never charged with. So the stuff Hunter Biden could
there was a lot Hunter Biden was never charged with.
Right. So the stuff that the Hunter Biden was charged with and convicted, those I think are definitely pardoned the same way any other crime would be.
Yeah,
he has the power to do it for his son.
The stupid gun charges, and I'm not trying to, especially as as a huge 2A guy. You know this. I mean, look, I'm sitting here at my desk. I mean, my God, y'all know I'm a huge 2A gun guy. This is one of my weekend range toys, like right here. Okay. Nice. So, I mean, look, the point is that Hunter Biden had a criminal record. He was charged with illegal possession of firearms because of his criminal history, which is a legitimate charge. He shouldn't have had it. But the fact of the matter is, the reason the government just went down that road and charged him with that charge, which for anybody else out in America would be a serious charge. But when it comes to Hunter Biden, pardon my French, that was the most thing they could have charged him with.
That was intentional.
Exactly.
That was intentional. It was intentional. This is what's so sick.
Yeah.
This is what's so sick about him claiming that the DOJ is corrupt, which is hysterical considering that's the same DOJ that went after Trump, and Joe labeled his own DOJ, and it is his DOJ. They're not working for the people. They're actually working for the president, because the president is the voice of the people, and he's the one who's telling them, look, I was elected, I'm the voice of the people, I'm giving you a direction. So all these Senate confirmation hearings, when you hear these senators say, I want to make sure you're working for the people and not for Trump, that doesn't make any sense. The people don't call up Pam Bondi and say, I want you to charge this person. I want you to start prosecuting on antitrust. I want you to start prosecuting on people who are involved in whatever it is. They don't have that voice. The only one who has that voice, who's the voice of the people, is the person we elected in November, with the majority of Americans coming out and voting for him. So working for Trump is working for the people. And these senators like Schiff, who get up there and say, I want to know that you're going to be working for the people, are talking out of their ass, because there's no such thing. There's no such thing unless they're literally going to Trump and saying, what do the people want? You're the voice of the people. You're elected. I'm not elected. I'm a chosen official. I work for the elected person. That's working for the people. And that's something that so many people miss. That's a very critical point that we drifted into here, which is that working for the people means that you are actually following Trump's directive, as opposed to going with what your heart says that the people want. That you weren't chosen for that. The people chose Trump. They didn't choose you, appointed cabinet member, you head of the DOJ, you head of the FBI. It's not up to Ray to decide. He was supposed to be following whatever his leader told him, because that leader is the voice of the people. That's what working for the people. That's how you're working for the client. The client's voice is manifested through the president. And so I haven't heard anyone else express this, but it's such a critical, important thing to understand about how our system is set up is designed to operate. And I think so many people miss that. But when we're coming to this whole thing here with Hunter Biden, why was he charged with those low level crimes? It's because they were desperately trying to show, there's one equal justice
fairness
for all.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes,
exactly.
That was it. There's fairness.
Yeah.
So we're going to hit him with the smallest possible charge we can possibly come up with. We're going to ignore obvious charges like FARA violations, all this other stuff. We're going to let certain charges lapse because of statute of limitations issues, and we'll come up with this stupid, ridiculous gun charge just to show that no, we really are. When we go after Trump, that's because we go after everyone. We even look. We're even going after we're going after Hunter. Look, we're going after Hunter, and that's why. Yeah. And that's why Joe Biden is like, I respect the rule of law. We all need to respect the rule of law, and I'm never going to pardon. And then when it comes out that he's actually found guilty and all the cases against Trump are falling apart, he's like, yeah, okay, get my kid out of there. I'm not letting him stand with that.
Yeah, you're right.
Pretty much. No, what I was going to say was this. This is why I've missed Joe on this show so much. Make sure you're subscribed to Valiant Renegade and join us every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show.